we have a real problem here. Even if, let's assume for a moment that the initial reporting about this being a caught in the crossfire moment is true, well, then that would mean that the cartels are still willing to execute women and children in the midst of a gun battle with their opponents, knowing that this is going to be, I mean, even in Mexico, this incident was going to get a lot of attention. They don't care. They're not worried about the bad press particularly. There have been so many murders and so many atrocities in Mexico. They have police convoys that are ambushed with, I think it was recently, 9 officers in one instance murdered by cartel gunmen. Why does this come as a surprise to so many Americans? Why does this come as a surprise to people in this country? Well, we are led to believe by the press, by the Democratic Party, by the open borders movement here, that Mexico is not a security concern for us. When if you look at the amount of heroin that is pouring into this country, as well as opioids, the number of people that are dying from those heroin and opioid overdoses, and who controls that trade, it is almost entirely the Mexican drug cartels. Mexican drug cartels are poisoning American cities. Thousands and thousands of people now are dying every year, over 70,000 in one of our particularly bad recent years. And I know that the press likes to beat up on pharmaceutical companies, and there were some pharma companies that engaged in unethical practices for which they have now been financially annihilated, and perhaps there will also be further criminal sanction against individuals involved, including doctors prescribing drugs. But keep in mind that the way our laws work in this country right now, if someone sells opioids to a person who overdoses, they don't get charged with just selling a controlled substance. They are charged with manslaughter or murder. They are held responsible for that homicide. So based on that very same legal approach, which is a day-to-day reality here in America, the drug cartels are responsible for killing thousands and thousands of Americans every year. Who knows how many? It's very tough to actually get this data. I've asked around for it. I even asked somebody that contacted the DEA. Say, well, it's hard to know where the drugs come from. So we know most of the drugs come from Mexico. We know about 60 to 70,000 people are dying from these drug overdoses every year. We know Big Pharma has been put on notice, and doctors know they risk not just their license, but their freedom for decades if they overprescribe on purpose or illicitly prescribe these drugs. So what is the most likely scenario here? Let's put all of this together. That the drug cartels that are now multi-billion-dollar international criminal syndicates are responsible for poisoning our cities and causing just unimaginable social destruction. And yet we are told that Mexico is not a national security concern for us. We're told that the fact that there's a country right next door that has organized crime more powerful than the central government and can even outgun them in a major city is not something that we need to be worried about. Those syndicates, by the way, those cartels, they have connections, they have tentacles that stretch into every major U.S. city and, in fact, a lot of mid-sized and small U.S. cities, too. Sometimes they try to keep a low profile here because, thank God, our law enforcement has not yet been outgunned by cartels, and they still have to operate with some degree of discretion and fear of law enforcement in America. Not so in Mexico. And trust me, the history of that country, its corruption, its inability to have durable institutions that will root out corruption, that all indicates to me that what's going on there right now, there are people going all the way up the chain of the Mexican government who are either not willing to fight against the cartels or are on the cartels' payroll. The cartels have something on them. The cartels have threatened their family. The cartels are in some way exerting leverage on them. How is this not one of the biggest stories in the country? I ask you that question. How is it possible that we have 70,000 or so Americans dying every year, overwhelmingly from poison being poured into our cities by our neighbor to the south, by the organized crime groups there that are killing Americans on our side and killing tens of thousands of Mexicans, people who are just caught in the crossfire, day in and day out? Why can't they get control of this? Why aren't there law enforcement and judicial systems strong enough to finally root this out? These are questions that we should ask much more than we do, and it's also something that I think should get a whole lot more attention at not just in our media, but also from our own government.